Illinois Realtors leadership and your member-led RPAC trustees wish to thank all our members who invested in RPAC in 2020. With your support, our state association surpassed its goals and earned the National Association of Realtors President's Cup for the 4th year in a row. In addition, 107 members became new major investors. 16 Illinois Realtors were inducted into the RPAC Hall of Fame with an aggregate lifetime investment of $25,000, and 2 members, Gene Crosby and Chris Reed, reached the $50,000 lifetime RPAC investment milestone. Illinois Realtors also congratulates these local associations which met or exceeded their fundraising and participation goals in 2020, earning them the National Association of Realtors President's Cup and Triple Crown Awards. Congratulations on your outstanding achievement, and thank you for supporting RPAC. And last but not least, we want to congratulate the Main Street Organization of Realtors for ranking first in the nation for RPAC participation among boards of its size, achieving 62% participation. Main Street was also 5th in the nation on highest dollar amount raised by a local association. Illinois Realtors applauds Main Street Organization of Realtors for its excellent accomplishments. Your efforts truly made a difference. We are extremely proud of all of our RPAC investors. You helped RPAC elect quality candidates and inform our government leaders at the local, state, and federal levels whose decisions have a far-reaching impact on realtors. Thank you to all of our RPAC major investors. Find a full list of names at the end of this program.
Hello, I'm Antonia Mills, Vice Chair of the Realtor Political Involvement Committee, and I'm excited to welcome you to Part 2 of the 2021 Illinois Realtors RPIC Forum. The November election of 2020 has been said to have been the most important election of our lifetime. Whether that's true or not, our advocacy programs played a huge role in influencing down-ballot elections. In Part 2 of our RPIC series, we will provide an overview of our advocacy efforts in the past year and a deeper analysis of what happened in 2020. I would like to introduce Alex Finke, our Manager of Advocacy Programs. Alex, it's all yours.
Hello, everybody. Today, we're here to talk about the strength of Realtor advocacy. A big part of Realtor advocacy is you all, and these are the different programs that members are part of, and you are instrumental to our success for our overall advocacy efforts. And so we're going to start with RPAC because dollar bills. You got Political Action Committee is set up to give directly to candidates. And this is, Mark Twain said it best, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And RPAC is how we are at the table. And so I want to start off by saying, before I go into us just absolutely superseding all of our goals, I want to thank all of you for these voluntary contributions that you give to us, because we wouldn't be able to do what we do without you. And so quickly, 113% of goal for total spending, 136% of goal for major investors, 146% of goal for President's Circle, and finally, my favorite is 124% of goal for participation. This means that we are increasing and getting more of our members to buy into giving something to our Political Action Committee. One of our next programs is our Boots on the Ground, which is our federal political coordinators. We have one volunteer leader assigned to every member of Congress and the U.S. Senate. This year, we're going to focus on building out the contact teams for the FPCs so that they have more diverse experience when meeting with members of Congress. We are not 100% sure if we're going to be doing virtual meetings in May to replace mid-year, but we might be, so stay on the lookout for that. And then we are going to be, no matter what, we will be doing our Let's Talk Real Estate series, which we've had a lot of success in the past with, and that's going to be during August. That's the district work period for the members of Congress. Now, we have replicated the FPC program at the state level, and that's called the State Legislative Contact, SLC program. This is run by my colleague, Jimmy Clayton. And the things that he's going to be focusing on for that program is going to be best practices when communicating with elected officials. There's going to be more prep and more training for our SLCs for our Capitol Conference in April. We're still deciding exactly how Capitol Conference is going to happen this year with the pandemic. It's good. We need to take into consideration how to be effective, but also how to be safe, but also how to give the best member experience. And then finally, Jimmy's going to focus on in-district meetings with the SLCs once legislators are done in May with session. Now, our calls for action. I have always said when I speak to brokerages that lobbyists can buy all the dinners and lunches that they want, but what makes the realtors a lobbying force like none other is all of you. And part of that is your direct communication with elected officials. And we do that through calls for action. And so in 2020, we did 4 calls for action. We contacted 87 elected officials. We sent over 9,400 messages to those 87 elected officials. We had 9,400 members contact those 87 elected officials, and we sent over 22,000 messages. And this led to permanently stalling some ordinances. It allowed our lobbyists to communicate and get changes in other ordinances, all protecting private property rights. And you all, as the brokers of those transactions, benefit when we promote and protect private property rights. One of the ways that we get the calls for actions done is through the REALTOR Party Mobile Alert. And this is the text messages that you all sign up for. Instead of getting an email, you get a text message. It goes right to your phone. It takes 20 seconds to do, and it really matters. And we have currently 10,637 members signed up for the RPMA alerts. And that is huge, and it's only going to make our advocacy efforts in the future better because all of you are taking action. Now, finally, the section of this that I'm super excited about is we're going to talk about the 2020 election. Many people say that this was the most historic election of our lifetimes. I'm not so sure, but I'll let you make the decision on that. But I do want to talk about some of the things that did happen so that you're not confused when you're reading one person saying one thing and another person saying another thing. So in Illinois, what we saw is the highest turnout in this election than any other election since the 1992 election. 67% of voters in Illinois turned out to vote. That is huge. Now, it was not as big as what the experts were predicting. The experts were predicting a 11 to 30% turnout in 2020. That didn't happen. Now, we were never going to see 30% in Illinois because Illinois is a traditionally high turnout state. And this was 11 to 30% on top of what 2016 performed at. So what we did see is we saw a bump in 3.9%. So, and really what happened with that is Democrats turned out as well in Illinois as Democrats normally turn out. Republican participation that we saw in some other Republican states, we didn't see in the Republican areas of Illinois. The other big change in 2020 that is different than any other election that we've seen up until this point was that we had 59.4% of people who voted early. That is a 109% increase in early voting over 2016. 109%. Now, the biggest part of that and reason for it was the push for mail-in ballots. In-person early vote still made a majority. 51% of voters who voted early still did so in person, but that is a decrease over 2016 by almost 25-30% of people that rather than voting in person and early, they voted by mail early. Is this trend going to continue? We're not going to know until we see an election that has a vote by mail push that doesn't have a pandemic. So we just don't know if this is going to be a continuing trend or it's just a fluke due to the pandemic. Now, nationally, I know many of you are sitting around thinking to yourselves, especially people that are more politically aware and interested, is what happened with polling and the federal election? We have no idea. So should we trust polls? Should we not trust polls? I just want to give you a little bit of information on what pollsters did wrong, but also how wrong were they? And so I want you all to keep in mind that the polling errors in blue states and swing states averaged 2.5%, which is the same miss as in 2016. So it's not, and 2.5% for a polling miss is not very much. It's within the standard margin of error. The other thing to consider is that polling accurately predicted the national vote in the presidential race and correctly predicted the winner in 48 of 50 states. Now, was polling more wrong in Senate and congressional races? Absolutely. But something that I want to point out is that in 7 Senate districts, they were within 3 points. Something within the margin of error, polling is never going to be that right on. Whether you're up or down within the margin of error, you're statistically tied, and that's kind of what happened with the Senate races. And part of the reason why we feel that the polling was so bungled was due to how we experienced the election results. Due to different state rules, some states you can count early ballots before Election Day, some you had to wait until Election Day. And so we didn't really know what was going on while we waited for the vote to be counted in lots of different states. And now, not only on top of that, but now you have exit polls. And that's another factor that has to be considered. So you have the media reporting on exit polling, which is the polling that people who have already voted, they walk out of the polling place, they are approached by a survey taker, and they collect that information. So now you have the pre-election polls, the exit polling, and when all the votes were being counted. And it's just kind of a jumbled mess, and it made things seem less certain than maybe they were. But pollsters did make errors. So let's talk about why they did that and what the challenges pollsters are facing. Now, the first thing that many of you may have heard is the silent or shy Trump voter. This is a non-response bias. Essentially, what this theory is that a pollster calls a voter and a voter goes, I'm undecided, when they're really going to vote for Trump, but they just don't want to admit it to the voter. There is very little evidence that this actually happened. There is some, but there's not much. What we have much more evidence for is that polling favors Democrats because Democrats are more willing to answer the phone and tell a pollster what they actually think than Republicans are in general. On top of this, there is a group of what we'll call conservative voters. I'm not going to call them Republicans because they don't typically always vote. When they do vote, they probably will vote for Republicans, but they vote so infrequently that we just don't know what party they would vote for. But they were particularly mobilized by President Trump and his personality. And a big group of this group of voters is they're conspiracy theorists. And they are even less likely than your average Republican to not respond to polling. So this puts pollsters in a position where they have lots of Democrats that want to answer the phones and very few Republicans and conservatives that are willing to answer the phone, but we know those folks are going to go vote. The next thing that is happening is that the voting electorate is changing. It's becoming more diverse, it's becoming younger, and based on, we already talked about early voting, when the voters are voting, that is changing how and making likely voter models, which is the group of voters that pollsters generally choose to pick out of registered voters, it's complicating things for their likely voter models. They are making it, the margin of error for selecting a likely voter is becoming harder and bigger and bigger. It's becoming more difficult. The next thing was there was much more enthusiasm this year on the Republican side. Biden was consistently within the margin of error with the generic ballot. This is a problem. Whenever a presidential candidate of either party is within the margin on the generic ballot, which is just simply who do you prefer in this election, a Democrat or a Republican, there's a problem. Generally, the individual always does much better than the generic ballot. And lastly, it was the media's misreporting of polling. Very often what you get is the media will report the polling as Biden versus Trump in Florida, Biden's up by 3. That's what you hear and you go, oh, okay, so Biden's doing really well in Florida. He's probably going to win. He's up. But the margin of error on most polls is 4.8%. And so anything within that 4.8%, either way, doesn't matter. It's a tie. The media should be reporting it as Biden is tied with President Trump in the state of Florida. The other thing that the media does a really poor job of reporting is the rate of change in the polling. So if you have a hypothetical candidate, Mary Smith, who is up 9 in August, up 6 in September, and then up 4 in October, and the media reports it, candidate Mary Smith is up. Candidate Mary Smith is up. Every time they report it, you say, oh, and all you've heard for the last 3 months is this candidate is up. But they were up 9, they were up 6, they were up 4. What the media should be saying is her lead is narrowing, which that sort of movement is an indication that that candidate, while up every time, is in trouble and is trending to lose. So always consider how polling is reported to you. Now, I want to finish up with our specific influence in the 2020 election. So in 2020, we identified and supported with RPAC dollars 58 General Assembly races. That's the House and the Senate. We did 39 House races with 74% success rate. We did 19 Senate races with a 95% success rate. Those are outstanding numbers. That is anything north of 66% is really, really good. And then we also identified, I want to take specific mention of our independent expenditure program, mostly as a shameless plug because that's the program that I run. We identified 4 Tier 1 races. These were 4 Realtor champion candidates that we knew were in trouble, that we could actually influence the election. I worked with our vendors. We identified voters that we knew were going to vote Democrat at the federal level, but we could bring them home and have them vote for Republicans at the state level. These 4 were incumbents. They were all happened to be Republicans, and they were true Realtor champions. And one thing that the Realtors will always be is we are loyal to our friends. We are there for the people that are there for us, and these 4 folks were there for us. And so we had a 100% success rate with our independent expenditure program. So I hope that all of you going through each of these individual programs can see just how fundamentally important you all are to our overall advocacy efforts. And so whether it is you volunteering on a committee, you giving to RPAC, you stepping up and being a volunteer leader with as an FPC or an SLC, you can all see that we can't do this without you. And I just wanted to highlight that all for you today. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Alex, for that update and analysis. It is always a good reminder that our advocacy efforts start with each of us as Realtors. We hope that you enjoyed today's program, and we want to wish everyone a safe and happy 2021.